Welcome to another episode of Investing in Intellectual Property with Dave. Today, we have a very special guest with us. This person, through her company SwiftPaws, provides health and wellness to dogs all over the world. And as Mark Cuban put it on the hit show Shark Tank, is living the American dream. Please help me welcome Megan Wolfgram. How's it going, Megan?
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
No, absolutely. And you know what? In preparing for this interview, it was not only worthwhile, and for me, it was pretty good and easy because you have such a positive, upbeat attitude and energy. As I was kind of checking out previous interviews that you had, and obviously watching the Shark Tank episode, just kind of the passion in which you kind of go about things. I kind of felt that through the screen, and it made kind of preparing for this one that much more sweeter. And then the other thing I have to say is just kind of with these interviews, one of the good things for me is just being able to learn things that I didn't know. And for example, with kind of lure course, and I'm not coursing or lyric coursing, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but I had no idea that this thing existed, and just kind of being able to kind of get more information and kind of learn about that, which I thought was pretty cool. So I guess maybe, and we'll kind of get off into all that as the interview goes on, but I want to see if you can kind of maybe explain kind of SwiftPaws and kind of the flagship product to kind of get everything going. And I know, I definitely kind of go back in the beginning and tell your story and kind of coming up. I know you kind of have the economic background and whatnot. But if we can kind of, for the audience, share what it is, what SwiftPaws is and kind of what it does, I think that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love your energy too. And I love what you're doing with the podcast because IP and anything legal related tends to be sort of like hush hush. We don't talk about it. It's very expensive, and yeah, you might need to get a patent, but that takes years. And so I love that you're bringing a little bit of humanity to this world as well. So thank you for bringing the energy to a subject that does not usually get this level of energy. So SwiftPaws, right? What is it? When I only have 1 second to tell somebody, I'm like, we make dog toys. We can't take ourselves too seriously because we are in the business of helping dogs have a good time. What I've come to realize what it is that we do and this will be my 12th year since founding SwiftPaws this year. So over the last 12 years, what I've realized we do is we help people and their pets play better together. So I've started to think of it as like playing well with your pet because like we know that dogs especially have a ton of energy. Like I could go for, and I'm not a runner, but I could go for like a mile-long run with my dog, come home, and she's like, hey, nice warm-up. Like when does the real action start? Right, I'm huffing and puffing. So our flagship product, right, and so that realization of what it is that we're doing and we're this brand that now wants to embrace everything in what I'm calling the pet enrichment space has been a journey that stemmed from, and you nailed it, by the way, a sport that is not very well known by the common pet owner called lure coursing. Okay. And lure coursing stems from an even older activity called coursing, where people would take their sight hounds, think of like a greyhound or, a whippet, a saluki. There's a whole bunch of breeds of sight hounds, and let them run over open fields and catch game. So that would be like rabbits or something like that. Obviously we live in a day and age where letting your dog run after live game is not, especially for sport, like not necessarily because they're eating your crops, but because you've trapped the rabbits and you've brought them somewhere, like it's kind of frowned upon. We don't do that anymore.
Sure.
So lure coursing as a sport originated in the 70s, I believe. And that was as a way to allow people who had sight hounds to do this type of activity, which is, by the way, a really natural instinct. Like dogs have this natural instinct to chase. They have this prey drive. And especially sight hounds who use their vision to track game and then determine like, okay, I'm going to cut this corner and head off the rabbit over there before it goes over the next hill. They're so intelligent. It was a way for owners to get together and see their dogs kind of competing head to head and then determine like who has the best dog. I mean, in the history of mankind, if it can be done, we want to know who can do it better. So that's how it originated.
That's very true. So then because again, and this is probably going back to your background, with graduating college, did you always have this ideal or this thought process of, I am going to be an entrepreneur? Because that's, and going back to the intellectual property thing that you spoke of at the beginning, and it can kind of be overwhelming for someone who has no knowledge of, say, intellectual property or even business in general to say, hey, I have this ideal. Not only am I going to kind of bring it to life, but I'm going to start a business around it. And oh, by the way, I have to kind of figure out my IP, whether that's patents or trademarks. It can be a very overwhelming process. But again, some people, they're kind of bred and kind of brought up that way, whether it's maybe family members in that kind of business world and whatnot. So with you kind of growing up, was it always a thing of, okay, I'm going to be an entrepreneur, I'm going to start a business, or this was kind of like happenstance where it kind of came out of nowhere?
Yeah. I've been really privileged in that entrepreneurship was a viable path. I can't say that in college I thought I was going to start my own company pretty much right out of school. I got a degree in economics. I really thought I was going to go into, the world of finance and try to pull down that. At the time when I graduated, if you could nail down a job making $60K a year in a decently large city, like that was making it. And
that just changed. Boy, have times changed with that.
Yeah, right. Like, you can't live off of that in Chicago these days, right? Like, it's just not going to cut it. You're going to pay half that for your parking space.
Absolutely.
So, that was the dream. But at the same time, my dad had run his own business when I was a kid. And I have family members who actually have patents as well. I have a handful of family members who have run their own businesses over time. So it was always around me, the idea that maybe not that I could do it, but that it was definitely a viable career choice.
Right.
And I think people don't acknowledge the fact that if you don't see it around you happening when you're growing up and when you're forming your ideas about the world, it can be so incredibly, you could do anything. Oh, you can do anything. You can do whatever you set your mind out to do. Yep. Actually, it's a lot harder if you haven't seen anybody actually doing that thing that you want to set your mind out to do. And so for me, I feel incredibly privileged that entrepreneurship was all around me and that I saw people having success and enjoying their lives and also running their own businesses and the pros and the cons and all of that. So even though I didn't think I'm going to graduate, I'm going to start a business, it was something that was on the table. So when it did kind of fall into existence, it didn't feel foreign.
Gotcha. No, and I think you bring up a good point. Just kind of me coming up in kind of an environment I came up in. I didn't see like successful business people. And from an attorney perspective, it was either a criminal attorney or maybe a bankruptcy attorney. But a lot of the stuff in the area that I grew up in was kind of more poverty-stricken things that somebody would kind of experience, and it kind of feel tougher to kind of make it out that type of an environment. And I think it was, I think you brought up a good point in that I didn't even know what a patent attorney was until I kind of got out to almost into law school. So, because I just wasn't seeing those things every day in my environment. So it seems like you were very fortunate, or maybe at least more fortunate maybe than an average person, in that you kind of saw these things in terms of business owners and patents, and these were from kind of family and friends that had the hold of these things, which I would imagine that made those things a lot more reachable or attainable as you were coming up. So I guess I have a question. So with the lure coursing, at what point did you say, hey, this is an issue, or I can maybe add value or solve a solution to a problem within the sphere? Because I know you said lure coursing kind of was created in the 70s. But at what point, as you were kind of looking at these things and say, okay, I think I have a pretty good solution to this problem that I'm kind of seeing with regard to lure coursing?
Right. It happened so organically. I didn't have a sight hound. And I think a lot of people are surprised, like, oh, you don't have greyhounds? Like, no, I don't. I love sighthounds. There's nothing like a soft, like whippets. If you've ever had the amazing experience to touch a whippet, they're the softest dogs on planet Earth. I will stand by that. I will put my money in the ring for a whippet being the softest, right? They also happen to be some of the fastest, and they are the fastest dogs pound for pound. Gotcha. But as incredible as sighthounds are, I didn't have a sighthound, but I did graduate college, decided to take the summer off, and I loved just playing with my dog. The dog that I had at the time was a miniature pinscher, so like kind of small, yappy, and he was a bit of a jerk. I think I actually even said that on Shark Tank. I didn't mean to say that on Shark Tank, but now everybody knows that like he wasn't the easiest dog, but I loved him with my whole heart. I'm like that mom who's like, no, I really love my kid.
Right.
And this dog, he didn't do a whole lot of things. He like didn't like to play with toys. He wasn't really social. He didn't really love to play with other dogs. So like there wasn't a whole lot that I could do to make him happy other than feed him. And like, you know, I didn't really want an obese miniature pinscher.
Right, for sure.
So I was doing dog agility, and he did that for me and for the food. And I wanted to try other sports that summer before I buckled down to go look for that job in finance. That was the whole plan. Take the summer off, enjoy my summer, go home, spend time with friends, play with my dog. And my dog agility trainer at the time said that she had never had more fun than she did when she went lure coursing. I was like, what words did you even just say, right?
Right.
We'll break it down. So lure, like the easiest way, like think about fishing lure, right? Yep. So you're luring the dog. And then course is just literally the physical course that you set up. So it is a clothesline pulley system on the ground. So you've got pulleys in the corners, you've got string, and it's very flexible that winds its way around the pulleys. You put a pulley wherever you want to make a turn, and then you tie, oftentimes, just a plastic bag to that string. And so when the string goes around the circuit, the course, the flag or the lure goes around the course, and that's what they're chasing. Really, really, really simple concept. But as I've come to realize, going through patent, and also talking with a whole bunch of different engineering resources, much harder to execute in the way that we're trying to do that, and achieving things like performance and like being able to reverse direction and attain a certain speed and be safe and all that stuff. So I discovered the sport, and my miniature pinscher, like, he didn't like much, but he lived to chase stuff. If he saw a lizard, a squirrel, like it was on, he was never coming back until like that thing was up a tree. That was his passion in life. And so I knew that I had to try it with him. You know, long story short, he wasn't allowed to compete at the time because it was only open to sighthounds, the sport, right? The competitive sport.
Gotcha.
And so and then there was really nowhere to do it in the state of Florida. And that's where I'm based. And so I ended up thinking like, I'll just buy a machine. Like I'm crazy enough. I want him to try this. I'll buy one. And they at the time cost between like $4,000 and $7,000 by the time you bought all the pieces. Yeah. And I wasn't then. Like, I was just a broke recent college grad living with my parents. Like that was not going to happen.
For sure.
Not even close. And so I think one of my best qualities as a founder, you know, you learn your strengths, and I would not recommend founding a company straight out of college. You've got like no practical life experience. And I've learned so much in the last 12 years running this company, more so than any education could give you. But I'm stubborn. And so when I grab onto an idea, I don't like to let it go. And I'm like, I've got to see, like, I think he's going to like this. I have to see him try it. So I ended up making a very crude machine with the help of my dad.
Nice.
Which, flash forward, it's really funny now because we will put our ads up on Meta or wherever, and people will comment going like, well, like, I could totally make one. And I write them back. I don't think they're expecting a company that looks like it's as big as ours is to respond like this, but I write back. It's usually me replying to the comments, and I'm like, we totally support that. Like, that's how we got started. Do it. Not why. Like, go for it. In fact, if you've got questions, let me know. Like, I would be glad to help you build your own machine. because I know that journey and I love that journey.
Yep.
So Pretzel, the dog, right, the miniature pinscher, his name was Pretzel. He went nuts. It was like he found his calling in life when I ran him with my like crude machine for the first time.
For sure.
And it was like that, like satisfying, like my heart was just full, and I loved watching him be that freaking happy doing something that I was able to provide for him. So that's how it all got started, just like me wanting to do it. And then it turned into a business over time. So because the sport was so restrictive, right?
Yep.
Never tell somebody no if you don't want them to try harder. I think that is so much in this world comes out of situations like that. We're like, well, why can't my miniature pinscher do this? And I had really good timing. So little did I know, like that same year that I actually founded SwiftPaws, which was a year later, it started out just doing it with my own dog. And then that kind of snowballed, and I was like doing it with my friends' dogs, and then once a month in my community, just letting people come out and like pay $10 and run their dog. And then that turned into me going, well, wait a minute, what if the doggy daycare in town or the dog trainer in the next town over would want to add this into their current business as a way to engage their own community? Like I saw what was happening in my community, and within a few months, I had 100 people showing up on a given Saturday once a month to let their dogs run around a field after a plastic bag. Like it was magic. And just as a way to help people who are already in business, like people who, because I thought this would be really hard to do as a full-time job. Like it's not going to make you that $60K a year. but if you're a dog trainer and you could do this once a month in your hometown, right? So if you could engage your community in this way, and then also give back and like work with the local charities, maybe running some dogs at the shelter, like it would be so beneficial. So that's how it got started as a business, was as a way to provide what used to be extremely expensive, high-powered equipment, which was much scaled down, by the way. Like even our professional grade machine, it can't even begin to run the courses that people run for sight hounds. It's not powerful enough. Right. Those courses are hundreds, if not thousands of yards long. Yep. And our machine is best suited for like 200 yards or less, basically. Gotcha. It's not meant to do that level, but it also means that it's really well suited for all shapes and sizes of dogs.
So I have to ask you this, because you said you initially started with the ideal or the mindset of, hey, I am going to target kind of local businesses, dog daycare businesses and things like that. What was that feedback from them? Did they love it, or did you kind of switch gears to provide it to the
they loved it. They loved it. Yes. Like it was so pure, because what we would do, I had a business partner early on. So after I was running this as a monthly event, after I'd made this machine with the help of my dad, I ended up getting into business, founding SwiftPaws with a partner who, when we got together and talked, had said, well, what if once we make 10 more of these and sell them to local businesses? So it was actually his idea to make just duplicate what I had done with my dad a few times over, maybe a little bit more professionally, and then so and not as a long-term business plan, just as like, hey, like let's tinker around and let's do this. And it worked so unbelievably well. What we would do, so then for like 7 years, right? Because the company did not have a backyard consumer version. We didn't ship that version until 2019. So from 2012 to 19, like it was just commercial grade only. And in that 7 years, we built and sold almost exactly 100 machines. So if you were getting rich in that 7 years, like you're wrong. Like nobody got paid. Like this was a side hustle. It was just because we wanted something to do with our time that like felt good, and like we were just working things out. And that's such an exciting place to be at in a business when you don't need to rely on it to like pay your mortgage. It's a really nimble time. You could be super creative. You could pivot really fast. And in that time is when we went for the patents, and right, so all that stuff happening in those first 7 years of the business. But what we would do is we would travel around the country to these pet-friendly events. And I think like you probably know of at least one in your city, right? Where somebody, either a rescue group or maybe the city itself, has like a bark in the park, right? And it happens every spring, or wherever you live, there's at least one. And the whole town comes out, right, with their dog. And you come out to the park and there's a bunch of vendors and somebody's selling beer and somebody else has a dog park going and everybody's like giving out dog treats and everybody's got their Fido on a leash. And we would go into these events and we would pitch to the event organizer, like, hey, let us come in. We'll do it in kind. Like, you don't pay us for any entertainment. We don't pay you for a vendor space. You give us enough space to like run a demonstration course. We let people there that day give it a try with their own dogs. Bound to be a hit. And our goal wasn't to just like, we would break even. So we buy plane tickets. We're flying to Colorado and Texas. We're literally traveling the country.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And we're like breaking even because we're charging people $10 to run their dog. And we'd have a line out the door. We almost never came home with a machine. So what would happen is
buy the machine?
Yeah. So we'd be sitting there, right? And you're watching this company with this thing that you've never seen before at this stage. And if you're a local dog trainer and you've paid $80 for your tent and you're sitting there and you're trying to hand out your flyers and then you see us making $1,000, $10 at a time that same day, you're going to walk up to us at the end of the event and you're going to go, wait a minute. So are you guys like coming into town and you're going to take over? And we're like, no, we're from Florida. We're going home tomorrow. And then you're like, well, whoa, wait a minute. Hang on. But all these people who just did this, they're going to want to do it again. And then we're like, well, would you like the machine? And we had quite a few people buy the machine that we were running because they're like, well, this is here now and you don't have to ship it to us. So we want it. And that was really an amazing time. That was when we saw just the like desire for this kind of, because it's magic, right? People are having a good time. Dogs are having a good time. It's good for the business. It's good for like acquisition, right? You can like do all these leads of new people in a friendly way. They're loving it. You're loving it. So it's really, really awesome. And it was during those events too. So we weren't focusing on the people, just the public running their dogs. That wasn't the focus. The focus was the businesses all who had paid to be there.
For sure.
But I heard tens of thousands of people, and I'm not exaggerating, during that 7-year period, when their dog was running, turn to the person they were with and go, we need one of these in our backyard.
Yep.
And that is what eventually was the light bulb that like kicked us over into turning into a primarily at this point now we're a consumer brand.
Right, so. For sure. And I guess let me ask you this. So I would imagine that you still had a full-time job at that point that you were maybe kind of going back to, or were you like...
Yeah. Shout out to my veterinarian, Kehoe Animal Clinic, what this woman saw in me. So one big thing I like to talk about too is mentorship. If you don't know where your mentors are going to come from in life, the very first event I ever did was before SwiftPaws was founded. It was in October of 2011. And I had made this machine and Pretzel had loved it. And I was like, well, the last hurrah, before I buckle down and look for a real job, I'm just going to have a little event. A friend who had a horse farm, they let me use their front pasture. And I told my agility friends, like, come on out. We're going to make some pulled pork. We're going to play some music and you can run on this crazy lure machine that my dad and I made. And the word got out and like 60 people showed up. And I only knew maybe 20 of them. So they all told their friends, like, the dog thing's happening. Come on out. And Martha Kehoe, a local veterinarian who I didn't know, had been told by a friend about it and showed up with her Rhodesian Ridgeback, who didn't do it at all. He thought it was stupid. He looked at it. And then this Rhodesian Ridgeback, by the way, is a sight hound. And so I think that's why she was like, oh, cool. Like, this might have a sight hound.
Yeah, for sure.
Things, let's try it. And her dog, like, we literally have a picture. And so it was a fail for her dog. And not every dog's going to like it. But she and her husband sat there that day and they saw me, like, scrappy, like running around trying to fix things when they broke. And like, oh my God, so many people showed up and I'm just like doing my best. And she was, I didn't realize it, but at the time she was preparing to open up her own veterinary practice, which she had been wanting to do for about a decade. And so when they got to that point, she called me and she was like, I remember you from this event. You were running the show. Like, we want you on our team. And they graciously hired me. I worked as a receptionist for them for about 5 years. And then like amazingly, as SwiftPaws became a full-time job, they let me go down to 4 days a week, then 3 days a week, then 2 days a week. And they would only call me if they needed help with certain things. And they were so gracious and so wonderful and mentored me with setting up the business. And when I had to go for an event, right, because I'm still doing the event, they would let me go on a Friday. And so big shout out to like mentors, because that's solely what made it possible for me to survive and run a business which didn't pay me until 2020. So I started in 2011. That's almost a decade of no paycheck from SwiftPaws.
No, but I mean, again, and I love it because people think, and kind of this is the part of kind of just the reality of kind of starting a business and kind of developing a product and trying to start a business around it is, and people maybe think it's, hey, you come in and you start making all this money, and although it can turn into that, a lot of times you are working for free for year after year after year, particularly in those early in the early stages of the company. And I think that's good for, I guess, up and coming or aspiring entrepreneurs to understand that, so that they can kind of hopefully get kind of more of the puzzle and an understanding of kind of what they're getting themselves into. Now, I guess I did have a question, because I had kind of heard that you had collaborated with zoos on enrichment for cheetahs and other species. Did that help out at all as it relates to when it was time to kind of invent this course, or was that just kind of more so the love for animals? And like, how do you, did that something that helped out? Because I'm a big proponent, and the reason I'm asking that is because I'm a big proponent of sometimes inventors, it can run a gamut. You can have something that you have no experience in, and you kind of invent something that's around or in that area or that space and kind of create a business. But other times you have, we're not just doing, we're working in some form of fashion day to day as we kind of growing up and living our lives. And naturally you gain skills or a better understanding in that said thing compared to just kind of the rest of the population. And a lot of times I see people kind of use that as a springboard to kind of invent something and kind of start a business from just kind of their expertise or their skill set from kind of what they've been doing for 10, 15, 20 years. So I guess, did the helping out with the zoos and with the animals, did that help out with this, or is that something that was cool, but it kind of really didn't help out one way or another with SwiftPaws?
Yeah, it is one of my absolute favorite parts of what I do. It might not have helped directly with like business connections or anything like that, but here's what a self-proclaimed like pet animal enrichment geek, like I once I discovered the world of enrichment, and that word, like, it's a little bit clinical, which is why I'm starting to talk about like playing well, because we can all understand play and how it's important, but like to play well is to conscientiously provide mental, physical stimulation, and how important that is. Enrichment really originated in zoos. If we think about zoos, not that long ago, they were not much more than sort of an enclosure, may or may not have had some plants or some water in it. And they would try to provide the animals as close to their natural, maybe nutritional needs, maybe like their socialization. So if they would naturally live in small groups, maybe they'd try to house them in small groups. Not always, but there was this like push for what can we do as zoos to provide these animals with an equivalency of what their life would be like if they were in nature. And there was this reckoning when we realized that animals don't do very well without something to do, without mental stimulation, without physical stimulation. And there's these things that we call stereotypies, which is a technical term for basically any behavior that comes out of boredom. So like pacing. If you've ever seen an animal pacing, and guess what? Some of our own pets do that. Some of our own pets will get excited and they'll pace a little bit, right? Like it's a built up frustration, excitement, boredom. So these stereotypies, whether that be pacing or a more destructive behavior, right? Or pawing or this repetitive swimming in the same circle, that is a way to try to alleviate the need. It's a literal need to have an outlet for their energy and their natural instincts.
Nice.
And so enrichment as a term, and then all these types of enrichment, right? So you've got, like, we think of enrichment in the dog community now as like food-based. There are so many ways to do enrichment with food, but it's not only food-based. There's also like social enrichment, and there's also physical enrichment, and there's enrichment that can have anything to do with one of the senses and everything. We have a joke at SwiftPaws where, like, we'll send each other a meme of a dog doing something silly, and we're like, is it enrichment? Yes, because almost anything can be enrichment, but it really stemmed in a scientific way, and then it was studied. And then, like, now it's unequivocal. Like, animals need, especially like wild animals that would be in zoos, they need enrichment. It's not, it's a given now. It's not a question. And so I think my experience that I was so fortunate to be able to have early on with zoos and also zoological organizations and conservation programs, very limited experience, by the way. Like, it's not like I spent a career in that. I just got a chance through what I was doing with the lure coursing equipment to see a piece of that world and how they approach it and how they talk about it, and also how they talk about animal behavior and how they relate that back to enrichment. It was super meaningful for forming the company, and also how we now think about what it means to have a pet and to provide them with the best life possible.
Nice. So, and so you kind of going back to what you talked about earlier, as far as, hey, I'm kind of doing these shows, and I'm kind of collecting money for people to run their dog through the course, and then I'm essentially selling the course at the end of it all. And it kind of dawned on you, like, okay, we need to kind of get this into the hands of just pet owners.
Right.
How much different was that course that you were taking out to these shows from the course that you actually end up kind of making or manufacturing that's kind of being sold to pet owners now? Was it very similar, or was it drastically different? How kind of different or the same was that was the course?
It's functionally exactly the same, and it's so different at the same time. That's the fallacy, right? Like, that's what gets you, is you look at it and you go, man, it's just a motor and some string, right? Like, you just spin it around, and how hard can it be? Like, famous last words, how hard can it be? And we built it for years. We're like, well, how hard can it be to miniaturize it? No. And then I made the mistake of going, well, our pulley, right? So we have the motor, that's what runs it, but we also have those pulleys out there, and those don't have a motor in them. But I was like, well, okay, so our motor wheel is 8 inches. Our pulley wheel at the time was 4 inches. I was like, well, when I stuck a motor on the pulley wheel, that would be a miniaturized version. Maybe that could be a good proof of concept that we could make something smaller. Knowing nothing about anything in that world, right? Because this was a very functional product that we could make with our hands. No electronics, no circuit boards, no software. And I went to a hobby store and I bought like some motors. And I didn't realize like just how broken down hobby craft is. But like the motor had these 2 leads coming off of it, and I was like, well, how do I make that go? And they're like, well, you could just touch the ends of the battery, like touch it to the battery. And I was like,
sure,
this sounds real. It's getting really mechanical really fast. I'm not an engineer, and I like drilled out the hole in my cover, and I took the motor and I like stuck it in and just like somehow like epoxied it into the wheel, and took out the bearing, and then I touched the ends of the battery like to the leads, and it ran, and it ran. I had a little string set up on a table, and I think I have a video of Pretzel somewhere, like he like jumps on the table and chases it, right? I was like, oh, woohoo, he's got the new unit. And that was probably, I'd have to do the math, but I would say 2, if not 2.5 years before we shipped the first consumer version. So from that point, at that point then probably took 2+ years and $200,000 that none of us had to get it to the point where we could ship it to customers. And yes, like that journey included a successful Kickstarter campaign. I think we raised a little over $70,000. That was amazing. We wouldn't have been able to do that. Like there was a point that I just got kind of fed up of people saying, like they would come to us and be like, I need this. Could you sell it? We'd say yes. And they'd say how much? And we'd say $2,000, which is a lot less than $6,000, $4,000. But that's not like, it's like people complain about our pricing now. Like commercial lure coursing equipment is expensive.
Yeah.
And so, you know, they go like, okay, well, no, I can't spend that much. So I just got tired of it. And I literally took a piece of paper. I probably should have saved it. I don't even know if I have it anymore. Like a crumpled up piece of paper on my bag. And I said, you know what? I'm going to make one. I'm going to make a backyard version. When I do, if you put your email on this piece of paper, like not, and just, it wasn't even a form. It was just a sheet of paper. I was like, here's a pencil. Put your email on it. And when I do, I'll let you know. And for about 2-3 years, I think, at events, we had a piece of paper. It never got more sophisticated than that. By the time we launched the Kickstarter, I had 300 emails of people who had approached us wanting to buy it. And we said, well, we'll make one. When we do, put your email down. And those are the papers that like I was able to find and like read the email and like put it in. So we had 300 emails and we ended up hitting our goal in the first 24 hours on Kickstarter because of that, because of 3 years of work collecting those emails.
See, this is why I kind of love doing these, because for the audience, you get your side of things in terms of some very good jewels that you're dropping in terms of how you did it. And hopefully they can kind of take some of those same things and kind of implement or kind of deploy when they're kind of starting their company or their business or kind of developing their a product. But I guess on my side, I want to kind of say a few things as well. So a lot of times you had touched on it as far as functionally the product that we end up shipping to just pet owners, it was functionally the same as the commercial grade product. And what a lot of times what people don't know and I'll say this as a patent attorney, they think that when you get a patent on something, it's just this groundbreaking invention. And a lot of times it just doesn't work like that. Yeah, every once in a while you will go from the house phone or whatever to the iPhone, but typically these patents are incremental improvements. So as you pointed out before, okay, if a motor was in the main unit, maybe you kind of put a motor in other places, and that's an incremental improvement that you can get a patent on. And now, again, it's maybe not like you're not looking at it to say, hey, this thing is kind of drastically different from what's out there, but the effect that it can have can be drastically different from what's out there. And that may be going from, okay, only being applicable to a commercial use to everyday use or, use for everyday people. So that's one of the things that I kind of wanted to mention as far as, hey, as a patent attorney, these patents a lot of times are incremental improvements over what's out there. It's not like, okay, these ground earth shattering things or improvements that is going to be kind of wowing, so to speak, but they can still have that effect, I guess, if done the right way. So I guess that's one of the first things that I want to say as a patent attorney. But the second thing is, and maybe this was based on the stubbornness as you said it, where you don't have to have a mechanical engineering degree or kind of be mechanically inclined, so to speak, to kind of create something or create these prototypes. But if you have kind of this passion and kind of this persistence, if you will, you can go kind of get these products from off the shelf and kind of put a prototype together, and that can be the birth or the beginning of something big. So I guess to the audience, I don't want to just pass over some of the things that you said, because I think those are worthwhile and those are important as people are kind of thinking of, okay, do I want to start a product or create a product or start a business? I think some of those things that you said was, they were definitely, they was some important stuff. So I didn't want to just kind of, and then also with the Kickstarter campaign, I thought that was a genius idea to say, okay, I actually interviewed, her name is Rhonda Mason, and she has a TP Sweets, which is like a kind of toilet paper dispenser. And she didn't want to kind of use her money or maybe kind of use 401k or other assets that she had. So she's kind of launching the Kickstarter campaign. So a Kickstarter can be another good way to kind of do a soft launch for your product and kind of get feedback in that way. And if you're going to these trade shows or these kind of shows and whatnot, as you put it, hey, get a piece of paper, write these people names and emails and maybe contact information that are interested in it, so that when you do the Kickstarter, if that's something that you're doing, or when you launch the product, you can kind of reach back out to those people and say, hey, I know it maybe has been a few years, but I'm finally launching this product and I know you have some interest in it. So please check out the website or whatever the case may be. I mean, I just think that stuff is extremely helpful, and I just didn't want to, I guess, gloss over that.
Thank you. Unpopular opinion maybe, but I think the minimum length of time you should prepare for something like a Kickstarter would be about 6 months.
Okay.
It's not, it's what you put into it.
Sure.
And I'm not saying that there haven't been the like wild campaigns that made it on the front page and blew up, but that's winning the lottery. And I don't know about you, but I don't like to leave my business up to chance.
Oh, for sure.
And so I was very confident that we ran a 30-day campaign, and I think our goal was $20,000. And you're like, okay, well, why, Megan? You said it took you $200,000 to design, engineer, tool up, pay for the first round of a product. And so why 20? And for me, it wasn't that I wanted to get all of the funding from that campaign. I wanted to prove that enough people were interested in it, and it was worth continuing to try to put it out there in the world. Sure. So for me, Kickstarter was it was like a market validator, because I've been drinking the Kool-Aid. I've been at these events with people just clamoring for it. And I'm like, oh, it's so clear, but is it, right? Once somebody can pledge money, things can change sometimes. So for us, that's what the Kickstarter was. Really interesting point that you said about the incremental progress too. Like, inventions aren't always like, aha, like that's it, I've got a completely new thing. And for me, I didn't want to invent anything. And my former partner, he didn't want to, we weren't planning to invent anything. And really what it came down to was, I couldn't believe that this sport, that this area, this lure coursing phenomenon had gone on for as long as it had, with the absolute ridiculous system of these pulleys. So let's I'll just get technical for one moment about what resulted in us pursuing and eventually getting the patent. So I always have products with me. This is our newest pulley, right? The very slender, not at all like the original pulley, but here it is. And the pulleys that used to exist look something like just a spinning wheel on a shaft. And that's all they need to be. But when you think about it, when you've got a string around this pulley, and then you've got like land and hills, and now you're trying to run it at 30 miles an hour, and you've got dogs running around, and the string is flexible, the string quite frequently falls off. And at my very first event, the very first one I ever did in that horse pasture in 2011, I probably got up off my chair where I was running the machine and walked out. It always is the furthest pulley away. I would have to walk out and hook the string back on the stupid pulley. So many times I got tired. And it was after a few years of doing that it was like, wait a minute, like there's got to be a better way. So then we tried like clothesline pulleys and all this stuff. And like, the string couldn't be effectively captured on the pulley without trapping enough space there. And so then the lure, right? So the lure is much, much bigger. And I've got, oh, look, I happen to have some string and I happen to have a lure. Wow, this is just going to be a demonstration now. So here's a lure and here's some string. And the issue is, when you've got it going around a pulley like this, like there's plenty of space there. Yep. But if I were to trap the pulley wheel so that the string couldn't fall off, the lure would get stuck. Yep. And that was the issue. And for years, for decades, the pulleys got taller and taller. So that the string would have, less likelihood to come off.
Yeah.
But think about this. The taller the pulley, the more dangerous it is for a dog to run into. And if it stays directly in the ground, you're talking about a rock out there that a dog could stub their toe on. So our pulleys, what we ended up doing was we created a cover that traps the line from being able to fall off the pulleys. The line can't slip over or under. It can come off, but it has to go back on because it's tension. Yep. But there's a window that's larger behind it that allows the lure to pass through. And I was like, this has to have been done. And I searched for it for a long time. This has to have been done in sailing. This has to have been done. Yep. And yes, something similar has been done, but not so that you can open it up easily. and
Yep.
access the pulley. So it's been done in a closed configuration. So like I did not invent. I invented like one tiny concept of an addition to something that already existed in a few other embodiments, but never had come together in quite this way for this purpose in this industry. So it's like, okay. Yep. And that's patentable. Yep. So our patent is on our system, which includes this sort of enclosed design, which, by the way, also makes it way safer. Now there's not exposed moving parts for a dog to step on. Now it's tethered. So the dog runs into the pulley, guess what? It moves out of the way. So if this is like a top-down view, that pulley has a lot of flexibility. So we've eliminated a lot of the frustration, but also a lot of the safety concerns. Yep. And that is like, in my opinion, inventing at its finest. In fact, I'll drop you the link to it. This is such perfect timing for our interview because we are on the cover of February's Inventors Digest.
Congratulations on that.
Yeah.
Oh, you definitely have to send that to me because I want to kind of share that when the interviews comes out. That's amazing.
Yeah, I think our patent issued, I believe it was in 2020. And here we are 4 years later making it on the cover. But a big shout out to Edith Tolchin is the author who wrote that article for us. It's very cool that we made the cover.
Nice. Congrats. That's huge. That's huge. Yeah. That's good stuff. I just think that people, it can be an overwhelming process. And it seems like kind of, we talked about it before with you and your background, you had maybe people, maybe friends, family members that had patents so they can maybe steer you in the right direction. But I would imagine, and I kind of do tutor a few people that kind of, I take through the process of, hey, reach out to the draftsman or kind of reach out to this person just to kind of get everything together or for helping them in preparation of filing a patent application. But yeah, a lot of people, the smallest incremental change can be something that is not only patentable, but kind of makes this thing applicable to a whole nother, I guess, demographic that it necessarily wasn't applicable to or wasn't available for before. So I definitely wanted to point that out, and I appreciate you kind of explaining that by way of your pulley system. So I do want to kind of get off into the Shark Tank because I loved your pitch on it. I thought you were on point through the entire pitch. But I guess kind of stepping back for a little bit, what was the decision like to go on Shark Tank? Because again, it seems like you had the successful Kickstarter campaign and seems like did some seed, some raising money in a seed round before. So I guess kind of what transpired to make you say, I need to get on Shark Tank?
Yeah, that was a journey. And, they say it takes a decade to make an overnight success. And that was definitely the case for us. So I had my first event in 2011, and I ended up pitching to the Sharks almost to the month, 1 month away in 2021. So how crazy is that? But, you said something to me, like before we started recording and we were just chatting, you said something to the effect of, if I had $1 for every time, whatever, I wouldn't have to. And my former partner and I had a saying, it was his saying, and he said, if I had $1 for every time somebody told me to go on Shark Tank, I wouldn't have to go on Shark Tank. And that's legit. Like he would say that, and we were in business for so many years. And so ultimately, when we did go on Shark Tank, by the time I was pitching to the Sharks, I had actually bought him out previously. But before I wanted to let him know. Of course, everything has to be a secret. But before we aired, I reached out to him. I wanted him to hear it from me, and I bought him a T-shirt, and it said, if I had $1 for every time somebody told me to go on Shark Tank, I wouldn't have to go on Shark Tank. And on the back of the shirt, I put also my company went on Shark Tank. And it was a really cool moment for us as well. And I can talk so much about like that whole partnership and how it came to be and how it came that I bought him out. But I've just been so privileged in so many ways. And like even that partnership is one of those. I know people who have had partnerships that haven't ended as amicably as mine did. But I'll gloss over that because Shark Tank was something that, is something that I think everybody has fantasized about going on. Even if you're an introvert, like even if you would never want to be up in front of a crowd, you see the show and the producers, what they've done with that show is magic. Like I think it used to be a little bit more in the early seasons, like you'd see some people get on there and like they would just get torn apart. And it was like, oh, terrible idea, and take it out behind the barn and shoot it. But I think over time the show has evolved. Like what they've realized is that like America wants to celebrate hardworking Americans.
Absolutely.
And so the show has become a celebration, really. Yep. Like you'll hear the sharks say, yeah, this is kind of niche, or like it's not a business I would invest in. But yep. By and large, they are celebrating the people who are brave enough to stand up there and pitch their businesses. And so for me personally, we were reached out to by a producer. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure it was because in August of 2021, a random customer bought our kit off Amazon. They didn't even buy on the website, and they put up a video on their TikTok, and I think they had like 300 followers. They didn't have a big TikTok following at the time. And they just showed their dog running in the front yard. And all they said was like, yeah, your dog needs one. And that video hit like 20 million views.
Really?
Yeah, it wasn't even our video. And that video went crazy. And then, of course, the person who put it out, like, put out more videos about SwiftPaws. And luckily they tagged us. And he's like, what is this? Like, oh, SwiftPaws. They tagged us. And I think that video is ultimately what like a casting producer for the show saw, and then reached out. So there's only one way to get on Shark Tank, and that's to apply. But there are times where they're looking, like they're always looking for people too. And in my case, when they reached out, it was like, oh, have you ever thought of applying? It's like, well, yeah, I thought of applying. Like, who hasn't thought of applying?
Right.
But I really, I didn't think my baby was ready. I was so terrified. I was like, no, we're too small. We haven't made a big enough of an impact. We don't have enough traction. The product's too niche. Like, it's too expensive. All these reasons why I had never even pulled up the application. That's how much my own self-doubt prevented me from taking a swing at what has ended up being one of the most amazing experiences for myself personally and for the business. Right. And so thanks to that producer who saw that. I'm pretty sure they saw that video. They didn't tell me they saw that video, but they said I saw a video. And I was like, probably the one that just went viral. And then about 6 weeks later, I was out there pitching. So it happened so fast. I'm really lucky that it happened that fast because I didn't have time to panic. I'm an overthinker. I'm a process person. I'm a rule follower. And I would for sure have gone just absolutely nuts. Some people, it's a year-long journey. They apply, and then a year later, they're pitching. So for me, it was about 6 weeks end to end, and a lot of paperwork. But it was. I didn't have time to think, and I didn't have time to second guess myself. And that was a real saving grace because I've learned to be a lot more confident now. But when Shark Tank came knocking, I was shaking in my boots.
See, and that's, I guess it's cool hearing that from the standpoint of, again, if you watch her Shark Tank pitch, you were amazing. You would have thought that you went in there cool as the other side of the pillow, extremely confident because you knocked it out of the park. But it's good, at least good for the audience to hear that, hey, going into it or leading up to it, it maybe wasn't, you maybe weren't as confident or maybe trying to talk yourself out of it. So I think that's...
I was fighting for my life in there. It was, and to be fair, not everybody has the same experience that I had. It was so positive.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
A lot of it's luck, right? Timing, luck. And I think that, in hindsight's 2020, but going into the show, I thought I had one expectation, and that was that regardless if the sharks think that it's, I knew they'd think it was neat, oh, it's cool. Regardless if they think it's a valid business idea, regardless of if they think it's too niche, regardless of if they think it's too expensive, I knew all the cons. Yep. I said, if there's one thing I want, it's for everybody, the sharks, the audience, everybody to see how much my dog loves this thing that I made. Nice. Because if you can see that, if you can see how much it makes my dog happy, you might think that it can make your dog happy too.
Sure.
And that was, and then I also thought odds are nobody's going to make me an offer because I knew it. Oh, it's a little business, it's expensive, all this stuff. And I said, any single one of the sharks. So you think to yourself, like, some of it's got to be made for TV, right? Like, Mr. Wonderful can't be that bad, right? Like, you really think to yourself, like, so I was like, any single one of these people are savvy business people. And if I can walk away with a deal with any single shark, and you don't know who you get. I think I found out who my panel was as I was leaving for LA. So like less than 48 hours before I was filming is when they told me who I was going to
have. And do you, at that point in time, when they tell you, do you think kind of based off what you have, like, okay, even though I'm just finding out 48 hours before,
try to prepare. You're like, okay, who has dogs and what are their names?
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
what I was doing.
or who's there? What product? This product, who can kind of help me out with it? Whether it's, I know Mark Cuban, he's, for example, big into like the tech space. So if you had a kind of more of a techie product, you maybe kind of try to target him more so than the other sharks. If you have maybe clothing or whatever, maybe do Dane and John.
I mean, I was a fan of the show anyway, so I had, and then I like binge watched the previous season when when it was going down, and so like I kind of had a feeling, and I had a very OG panel, which was awesome. I think everybody like secretly wants to have a guest shark, but at the same time, like, the OG panel, like, them, you know what they like, and you get to know them over the season. And so going in, I mean, I had Mark, Damon, Kevin, Lori, and Robert. And so it was like a very, very OG panel. And I thought that, any single one of them could add value. And I was trying to do my pros and cons and who's got a dog and who's going to get it and who isn't going to get it. And I was like, you know what? This, again, I'm making the dog toy. I can't take myself too seriously. If any single one of them sees something that they want to be a part of, I don't even need to question why. If one of them is willing to get involved, like, they've got something to offer me. That's the mentality I went in there with.
That's nice. Nice.
Yeah. And then I was terrified when like 3 of them went out. I was like, oh God, well, here it comes. Like, they're going to tell me my baby's ugly and send me packing.
Now, do they go out in that order that they show on the show? Because it seems like a lot of the times the ones, it's like if you do get an offer, for example, it's maybe one of the last man standing. So all the people who are out from the beginning. It seems like it's not okay. This person says he's in initially, and then these other 4 people say they're out. It's almost like out, and maybe the last 1 or 2 are in, and it kind of always breaks down like that on the show.
Almost always, right? Unless there's like just a big bidding war. Yeah, I think it's strategy too, because think about it from the shark's perspective. They get a lot more leverage if they're the last one standing.
That's true. So that's true.
If I was an investor, I'd kind of sit back, let everybody else go out, and then be like, actually, I think it's a great idea. And now I'm going to get a deal because I'm your last chance.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, like, they're so intelligent, and by this point, they're going on to season 16. Gosh, like, that's a long time to be doing something. And so they know, and I think there's a few truths that people don't always know about the show, right? Like, I fully believe that they have no idea who is walking out there. They have no idea. Like, I don't believe they're prepped. I don't believe they're fed questions. They're just so good at their job. Like, you're good at your job. If somebody brings you something IP related, you're going to have a general idea of what to ask and what to look at. They're so good at their 100%. Job. At drilling in, at asking the right questions. And I was in the tank. I was in there filming for almost an hour and a half. You only see 8 minutes on TV. So we unpacked about 20 minutes into questions. I was like, oh, wow, there's a lot to unpack here. Like, they know nothing. And then I think this made it on air. At one point, I go, yeah, it's a competitive canine sport. And Mark Cuban goes, it's a sport? I was like, oh, wow. Yep, it's a sport, too. Like there was just so much to break down for them. And we went into the nitty gritty. We talked about how I bootstrapped it and exactly where the money came from and the business partnership and buying out the partner and that process and the patents and so much that like would take way too long to put on TV.
Oh, yeah.
But I think the one thing you need to know is like what aired, at least in my episode, was exactly the order that it happened. So they cut out some of the meat and potatoes in between, the sausage making. They cut some of that stuff out.
Yep.
But everything happened in about the order that I remember it. And then also the gist was kept whole. So it's not like none of them were like being bashing and then you didn't see it, right? Like they gave me a good edit. I cried way more than they showed on TV. Like they made me look really good. I was a mess. So I'm wearing, by the way, I'm wearing Lori's golden ticket. I was terrified I would lose it, and so I put it on a chain, and I wear it now, and that's pretty cool. But once she pulls out the golden ticket, I was a goner. I was done. I knew what it meant. I'd seen it from before. I thought there was no way. I was filming on the last day of filming for all of season 13. So I thought, she's already given it out. Like, that's not even on the realm of possibilities.
Right.
And then she does, and I lost it. You don't see much of me after that point because I'm sobbing.
Well, it seems like they did a great job editing it. That's for sure. I just saw that when you were talking about a press who passed away, you kind of got a little emotional then. But other than that, it seems like you were pretty stoic.
Yeah, they probably cut out about an hour of me crying. No, but it was, so emotional. It's at that point, it's everything I had lived and breathed for 10 years. And I had lost Pretzel 6 months before that. So it was very, like, just all the timing was just crazy, right? Mm-hmm. Like it all. And I had meant, like, we had that pedestal next to me with my product. And we had set that there because I told them that it was important to me to share how his paw prints were on the bottom. And then, like, I'd forgotten. I'd actually, like, because you just get lost in the Q&A and there's crossfire and they're all asking over each other. Yep. I'd completely forgotten to tell them about his paw prints. And then when she pulls out the golden ticket, like, I probably should be smiling and, all that. But instead, I'm deer in the headlights. And then as I'm, like, staring at her in shock, I remember the paw prints. And so, like, I'm starting to cry and I'm, like, reaching over to grab it. And I'm like, his paw prints. So, yeah, what an experience, too, to, like, have gone through that whole 10-year journey, to have lost the dog that started it all, and then to end up on TV. And that's when I realized, like, they know how to tell a story really well. And I previously, if you look at SwiftPaws, like, social media prior to that, there wasn't a whole lot about me or the team or our dogs or our story or our why. And Shark Tank taught me something about our customer, and that is that the customer wants to know who's behind it. They want to know the story. And, like, people cared more about Pretzel, which, like, made my heart really happy. But I was like, who's going to care about my dead dog, right? Like, you beat yourself up a little bit. It's like, like, that's a human experience. Anybody who has had a dog and lost a dog can connect with that. And
absolutely.
And since then, you'll notice that we do a lot more of that with our social media, connecting with our audience and celebrating them and their dogs. And that's important.
Well, and I definitely noticed that on the social media with kind of bigging up or shouting out other people's pets. So then in kind of just from interviewing different people on Shark Tank, even though they may get a deal, it may not always work out. It seems like yours end up working out and kind of going to the finish line, which is great. How has that experience been with Lori? I heard you talk about the fact that, before the Shark Tank episode aired, she called you and made sure everything on a website and everything was the way it needed to get this massive audience that it was going to get once the episode aired. So has she been, like, great to work with, and just kind of in general going on Shark Tank, has that kind of really paid dividends in a way that we're looking forward to?
Yeah, not every single person who has been on Shark Tank has had a different experience. That's the one constant, right? We all have different companies. We all have different experiences with the show, offers, deals, happening, not happening, the whole deal. For me, my experience with Lori has been really positive. Nice. And I know also kind of how lucky I was to have closed on a deal with her. Yeah. Somebody did an article, I think it was in Forbes, on, like, the closure rate of those deals.
The heart is extremely low.
It's so low. It's lower than I would have even imagined. And one of the best things about going on Shark Tank is you get to connect with other Shark Tank companies and other Shark Tank founders.
Nice.
And that community, that sense of community, but not associated with the show, just us supporting each other and bonding with each other. And so you hear some of the good, some of the bad, the whole healthy mix of experience. For me, I'm continually shocked at how much she is able to do and support. Because if you think she's making a number of deals every season for 16 seasons, how many companies, and some of those have sold probably or whatever, but how many companies must she be supporting at this point?
For sure. Yeah.
And I'll give you one specific example. And like, to be fair, my deal wasn't for a ton of equity. It wasn't for, like, it's not like she's a majority stakeholder in my company now. So I never expected her to like fly to Florida and roll her sleeves up and help me with the manufacturing. Like, that wasn't ever something that I expected out of it. But one of the ways that I think she supports her entrepreneurs really, really well, outside of the fact that she's just an amazing supporter of fellow women inventors, is, for example, I was going for an industry prize, which we actually won this year. It's the Pet Care Innovation Prize. I applied for it multiple times. So, like, just keep trying. And we are one of the winners this year. It's by Purina, but it's an independent prize.
Okay.
And I needed a referral. I like needed recommendations for that process. And I had like made it into the next round, right? Like, you do an application and then they do like a down round a few times, ultimately choosing their winners. And so I needed recommendations. It's internal. And so I think I reached out to her and an email. And of course I have like her whole team, right? Like, I've got her team members' emails, but I've got her direct contact as well. And that's something people don't. They're like, oh, I'm sure you just talk to like her assistant. Like, I do, but like also I've got her direct contact and she'll reply on things. I wrote at like 9 p.m. at night, because that's when your girl is working and filling out applications. And I was like, hey, like, you know, it's not really an external thing, it's internal, but, you know, Purina, a massive company in the pet industry, I think this prize would be really meaningful for SwiftPaws, being a part of the network. And if you could write a recommendation, that would be super impactful. The next morning, I woke up to an email at 3 a.m., a reply from her directly, not only saying that she would, but she had already written it and already submitted.
Nice.
So, like, when is she sleeping? When is she? That's what I want to know. Yeah. And that kind of support, like that kind of responsiveness, that kind of support when you need it, is really immeasurable for me and for my brand.
For sure. No, and again, like you said, that's definitely and it seems like it also kind of creates some accountability. Not saying that you didn't have accountability in and of yourself, but it's when somebody's kind of pouring into you like that, you don't want to let them down either. So you go that much more harder, especially when they're, like you said, amongst the many other things that they're doing, when they still have the time to kind of write letter recommendations and respond to you and things like that directly, as opposed to maybe having their staff or their team do it. That kind of means more to you, it seems like, and like you said, makes you want to go harder. So that was really cool of her to do that.
It does. Well, and let's talk about that for a second. I mean, at this point, SwiftPaws, we do have investors. I still own a large portion of the company myself. But gosh, we wouldn't be anywhere without our investors. And I've got a board, right? It's a 3-person board. Myself is my largest investor, and it's an independent who did a baby product company. So baby and pet are very similar verticals, and having that accountability and not wanting to let them down, but also wanting to do the best job I can do for the brand.
Yep.
Like you want to tell them the positives. You want to have the big wins. So you can write them and say, hey, that new creative that we're doing for ads, like, it's crushing it. You want to give them the year-over-year data. And at the same time, the other thing I've realized that's probably a strength of mine is I rely probably even more so on those resources, the investors, the mentors, when things are going wrong. Yep. And I guess that's not something everybody does. I think there's a false mentality from people that they don't want to tell, especially an investor, when things aren't going well, when they've lost a client, or when, you know, whatever fire is happening.
Yep.
And you feel that gut wrenching, like, I don't want to tell them bad news, but at the same time, like, it's my first instinct, because they're so incredibly savvy and they've been there before and they've seen wins and they've seen losses. And if anybody thinks that they're going to make it or break it for their single investor, like, you've got too big of a self-ego, like, bring those bad things. And I really distinctly remember, you know, having one of those pep talks one time where I'm like, man, like, we're not hitting the targets that we wanted to hit. And I don't know why this isn't working. We've invested a lot into this. And their response is equally important. So, like, I'm also lucky that I've surrounded myself and I have investors and I have the board and I have advisors who, when I go to them with things like that, are like safe. So they don't go, that's it, I got to get my investment out because it looks like it's crashing, right? Like they respond in a way that is incredibly helpful and mentoring and nurturing, and like, how can I bring my experience to the table to help the company through this? And that, like, first of all, being willing to go to them when it's bad, and then also their response and like helping us over those hurdles. Like, I joke, okay, next step, profitability. It's a joke, but it's also very real. I mean, SwiftPaws as a brand has yet to fully make it. And for us, like, what's making it for SwiftPaws? For me, it's sustainability of our business model. So we've been break even for a little while now, a couple of years. And then we consciously last year completely redesigned and put a ton more investment into a new version. And that's hard because you're like, oh, I could be turning a little profit, but now I'm going to go into the hole again because I think that there's some evolution here.
Yep.
And so for me now, that pillar, that making it, that mark that I'll know that we've fully made it, is to prove the fact that the business model is profitable and self-sustainable. Not necessarily that we can grow 6, 7, 10x, right? Like that would be amazing. But for me right now, my burning goal is to be able to make and sell our products and to do so profitably so that we can sustain the business growing at a modest rate year over year. That's it. And then be in the position to do whatever. Do you want to raise more money? Do you want to grow? Like, awesome, but let's get there. Let's get the business to that point. That's my plan.
No, yeah, and I was going to ask you kind of the plans or the goals, some of the goals kind of coming up with Swift Paws. Now, I guess from a long-term standpoint, do you kind of see yourself, okay, I know you said to kind of get to sustainability. Would you see yourself, I don't want to say would you see yourself, but is the goal, because a lot of times investors want to know, are you going to sell at some point, or are you going to just kind of keep going and keep going and keep going and kind of build this thing into a kind of a national brand? Like, is that some of the things that you think about as far as, do I sell at some point once I maybe get to this number, or do I just kind of keep going and that's the plan? Because I know I was in Bigby Coffee. I think they have a few coffee shops in Florida, but they started here in the Midwest, particularly Michigan, and they do $250 million in annual revenue, and it's 2 co-founders, and I was able to interview him. His name Mike McFarland. He's a great guy, but I was asking him, hey, do you guys, because earlier on, I forget the Subway founder's name, where he, like earlier on in their business, he was looking to kind of buy 50% of Bigby, and he ultimately ended up kind of passing away, unfortunately. So they ended up kind of keeping it. But now they're like kind of crushing it, almost 400 stores nationwide. But I was asking them, hey, would you sell it? And it seems like kind of their motto is, no, we probably won't sell it. Me and the co-founder, like, this thing will last way kind of beyond after we're gone, and they're going to continue to kind of say feed nonprofits of their choice as their, I guess, initiative to give back. And again, not kind of giving a lot of money to their kind of kids, or, like I said, trying to sell it for a big exit. So I guess, is that something that you think about as far as, hey, kind of, do I sell this thing at some point, or do I just kind of continue to grow and kind of make this thing a national brand where we're inventing and kind of coming up with different product lines and have, a decent size workforce? I guess, how do you kind of think about all that?
Now, one of my investors and closest advisors has said to me a few times now, run it as if you'll own it forever. Otherwise, you probably will. Something to that effect. And it's, I think there's a lot of meaning there, because at this point, we have a pretty decent marketing engine. We're just starting to scale up. I have a product with a decent margin that I can start to scale on. People don't realize that the product I went on Shark Tank with, they say, oh, what are your COGS? And on the show, I said they're about $136. Well, they've gone up, but the point is, they say, oh, well, your COGS are $136, but you're selling it for over $450. Whoa, you're just
great margins.
Like, actually, that's not even a healthy enough margin to go into retail.
Really?
So retail, even third-party e-commerce, wants like 40%. And when my margins are like 56% at best, I can't do that. So actually the product that I went on Shark Tank with wasn't scalable. It wasn't affordably scalable. And that's why, by the way, a lot of the sharks looked at it, heard my cogs, and like people like, oh, that's all it cost you? Well, wait a minute. Yeah, that's the plastic and the motor and all the pieces inside, but that doesn't count my team and their salaries, or my rent, or my electricity bill, or my any of those other operating expenses.
Sure.
Like, you have to account for that too, and that does not factor into COGS. So when Shark Tank asks for COGS, you're missing almost $1 million of the equation in other costs to run a business like SwiftPaws every single year in the US, which is why Mr. Wonderful, who is way kinder than you would ever imagine him to be, truly, truly smart, savvy, kind. They make him out to be a heel on the show. I get it, but I will reveal that he is actually an incredibly kind person. He reeled me back in when I was losing it over losing pretzel, and they cut that out. But he said, look, if I partnered with you on this, he's like, I would be taking this to China. We'd be completely reimagining
I recall him saying that. Yep.
And he said, and I don't think that's what you want for the business, and that's why I'm out. Not, I don't think we could do it, but I don't think, and he was right. It is important to me that we do, like, I'm not going to live and die on 100% making it in America, right? Like, guess what? We don't make LiPo batteries, and that's what my product, my other versions run off of. Yep. So I have to get those from overseas. Now, I do it the best way I possibly can, but, it's always a balance. But it's important to me to do as much of it as I can here. The assemblies in my hometown, even some of our partnerships, they're local, and that does matter to me. And so as long as I'm at the helm, I will have sort of a lens of, can I do it in my backyard? And so I think that for a greedy business person, or for a much larger investor, or an investor that's only concerned about the return in their portfolio, I might not be a smart or a wise investment. For a similar reason, we might not be the best choice for maybe like a private equity deal, right? Like when you think about exiting, right? You say, okay, maybe private equity is going to want to quickly build up the company and then sell it again. And so when it comes to where I see the company going, I've been doing this for 12 years. I wouldn't really mind doing this for another 12 years. Like, nice. If it comes, like I've had a good journey. I love it. But options. Okay. So if I do my job well, if I get the company to a sustainable point, the company will be able to explore whatever works best. Is that a strategic exit to a partnership where the SwiftPaws brand gets to go national? Is that growing itself to that point? Is it a different kind of exit? Is it whatever that might be? I want to do my job as well as I can to set the company up to be able to choose its destiny. And that's what I want. That's what I want.
No, and I like that. And I love the fact that you have said in terms of having options, because I think that is a thing that kind of people should think about. Like, okay, I'm not forced to sell, or, you just have options. I can continue running this thing. I can kind of sell if I want to, and just having those options are good. But I must say, for someone who has kind of ran things for 12 years, and you seem energetic and upbeat as ever. And again, what you said, hey, I can run this thing for another 12 years. I think that got to confirm that suspicion on that. So that's amazing, because this is a tough journey in terms of kind of the ups and downs. And some people was like, tap out.
Sometimes those low points, they're so low.
For sure. No, absolutely. No, and so I want to be respectable of your time, but I do have maybe a few more questions for you. Number one, what advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs? Because again, as we talked about a lot more so off air, as far as the goal for me in doing this, or one of the big goals for me in doing this, is trying to inspire entrepreneurs, if they kind of really, if this is something that they really want to do, is to take that leap of faith, or that kind of jump into it, but kind of jump into it being informed. I'm a big proponent of being informed, and that's on the IP side of things, that's on the manufacturing. I think you brought up a good point as far as, okay, I can make a ton of more money if I manufacture this thing in China and be able to sell maybe for a killer amount with a private equity shop or whatnot, but just kind of being informed with the manufacturer and being informed with the IP, with different aspects of the business. And I think we touched on a lot today of different aspects of kind of business and kind of developing something or taking something from an ideal to an actual product and then selling that product to others, which I think is it's kind of an amazing feat in and of itself. But I ask, what advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs who, maybe kind of they're kind of double Dutch and they're like, they want to go in, but they're not kind of fully committed yet.
Yeah, it's what you want out of it. I mean, everybody's entrepreneurship journey is different. If you're hating your day job, right? And like you make decent money and you can support your lifestyle, but you're just miserable. I think that security can be a detraction. I'm not telling anybody who has like kids to feed to quit their job, right? But there's nothing like having to make it work that really puts you in a place to make it work. Like to a point, right? Like if you're too squeezed, if you're too starving, you're only worrying about the next meal, and then you can't plan long term for your business. But there really is nothing like being all in, being fully committed. And so I would say to somebody, really, before you take that leap, like I'm all in favor of that leap. But before you take that leap, ask yourself like why you're taking that leap. And if you're taking that leap because you saw somebody or you have a buddy who like just sold their company and they made a bunch of money and you're like, oh, I'd like to make a bunch of money.
Probably the wrong reason to do it.
The market's really good. Like the market, as in the job market, like you can go out, you make a lot of money working a job right now. With education, without education, there's like a lot of things. Like people be hustling, people be cleaning windows, making a $10K a week. Like you can make, if I wanted to get rich quick, I would absolutely not continue running this company. This company is a long journey that's as much a growth and development journey for me. And if I just wanted to be making six figures, which spoiler alert, I don't make six figures. Like this company is not a get rich quick scheme for me. I would love for the company to have success and financial success and ultimately be a success. But I did not embark on this journey. I did not continue this journey. I am not here still on this journey just because I want to make a quick dime. And it's so hard to reconcile sometimes because I have other friends who are in more traditional career paths and man, they're doing really well right now. Like they've got a lot of stuff. They're buying some new cars and it's hard not to sometimes think about like, oh, what can I be earning with that degree? So the why is really important. So ask yourself, what is your why? And for me, the why is like, this company doesn't owe me anything at this point. Like I'd love to make $1 million one day, but in reality, if all this company ever does is, and guess what? I do make a salary now. I can pay my mortgage. If all this company ever is an amazing job that afforded me to travel the country, have experiences like Shark Tank, and bring this kind of happiness to pets everywhere, that's all it ever needs to do. And so if you can't be satisfied by what you're making and what you're bringing to the world and what you're sharing, if that doesn't drive you, you might not be able to stick it out. Like if you can't get passionate or nerd out a little bit about what it is that you're making, if you're trying to invent something just for the sole purpose of like turning it into a money-making machine, amazing if it does. But you also have to really care about what it is, because in those low moments, like the promise of a paycheck will not keep you going. It will
No,
not.
and I like that. And I also think that, man, as you're kind of on your deathbed, hopefully a long time out, you're not necessarily going to care about all the money that you've made and or that's not going to be one of your lasting memories. I think what you're doing, creating this happiness for pet owners as well as pets, and getting, being on Shark Tank and getting experience all these different trade shows and events that you go to, those experiences will be at the forefront of your mind or at the forefront of your brain later on in life, as opposed to, okay, I worked 12 hours at such and such XYZ company making them a lot of money. I think the money is not going to be a thing that you're going to think about your last days. It's going to be more so those experiences. And I I guess that's something that I would add to that is to what you said as far as those experiences later down the line are going to be far greater outweigh, I guess, the money that maybe someone is making now or whatnot.
And then when you make the jump, don't be afraid to ask for help. Sure. So, I mean, with your line of profession, I know that there are people and there's a lot of resources out there to like do it yourself. Yep. And you know what? Kudos to those people. But as a lay person with no engineering background, with no, like, if I had a skill set that was maybe different or better oriented for that, maybe I would advocate for like DIYing it when it comes to a patent. But really, anybody who I've ever talked to, I say, go and find a patent attorney who understands your product. Because, God, it's so important that if you're doing something in the medical field, that they have experience with that specifically. And so many times we just feel like a little one size fits all when it comes to, I think, patent law. And it's weird because guess what? The world is a big, wide place with a whole lot of different kinds of inventions. And like the reason why your examiner is going to be extremely niche, like you also probably want somebody on your side who's extremely niche, who understands your invention inside and out. And I've got a whole long story there about our provisional and our non-provisional and a whole bunch of like horror stories about how our patent went abandoned. We had to resurrect it, like all this stuff. But the journey ultimately for me has led me to realize that like, don't reinvent the wheel. Like you might have a new invention, but don't reinvent the wheel when it comes to getting help in those professional areas, whether that's accounting or whether that's IP or whether that's what platform are you going to use to sell your product, right? Like it's been done before and it's been done well before. So don't try to do it yourself with any of that stuff. It's not worth your time.
No, and I love that. And I'll just add to the fact that, hey, even though we're patent attorneys, we have our niche. So I'm not working on chemical inventions. I may do some electrical mechanical, but I'm not working on hardcore electrical or software inventions. That's not my niche. If it's something mechanical related and something that's kind of within the spirit that I kind of have done, whether it's kind of consumer products or toy products or compressors or automotive or something that I have experience in, I have no issue taking that. But if somebody comes to me with some cool electrical way of doing things from an electrical standpoint, I mean, I can refer you to someone else, but I'm not doing that. So as a consumer, that's big to just kind of understand, because I don't want to kind of put it all on the professionals. I think we as consumers or we as business owners have some accountability as well to kind of make sure, I understand that money can be a thing and we're trying to get the best possible price, but make sure you're going to somebody who's going to kind of provide a good quality product and that has the systems and stuff set up. Because I revived a patent application that had been abandoned for a couple of years, and it took a lot, but that's not fun, for somebody to have to tell their client that their patent application has been abandoned because of, they didn't have the tools and the resources set up to kind of get notifications on
we
like these.
We could have avoided a lot of time and heartache and expense.
Yes, for sure.
And now you think about it, okay, well, yeah, you could do a provisional yourself, a couple $100. But then when it comes time to do non-provisional, if you really believe that you're going down that path, right? You're not just, I got 20 ideas, let's just pull provisional on all of them, right? Like you got to start with the end in mind. And so anybody who's at that point who's like thinking about doing a provisional, I let them know like better to find a really good patent attorney who understands what you're trying to do now. Spend $5,000, $10,000 on that provisional. Yep. Spend it, because you will be so much better off when you're trying to now go forward with the non-provisional and then eventually like talking back and forth with that examiner about those sins you made in your provisional. That it's really, really important. And like it's very niche, but like that applies to so many different areas.
For sure. Absolutely.
Especially IP.
So, and then I guess the last question is, where can people find you? I know you said you have some awards that you're just being awarded, which is great. How can someone find you on social media or going to the website if they wanted to be a part of the story, if they wanted to purchase a product? Where can they get that? Can you kind of share that information?
Swift Paws. Look that up anywhere. We've got almost every social media imaginable. We love to interact with people where they want to interact with us. We do have like a completely public community on Facebook. So people are like if you want to see like somebody real using the product and like not a video that we're posting or resharing, go to the community. You'll see people asking questions. You'll see people complaining about the product. You'll see people like real legitimate.
Yeah,
we also interact in the community. So I would say the community page is awesome if you're into that. Otherwise, SwiftPaws.com. We do sell all of our products there. We also have a number of our products on Amazon. So right now, that's where you can find the product. But I would encourage, like, if nothing else, try something new with your dog. I'm a really bad salesperson. You don't have to buy my expensive dog toy, right? Like, look, I get it. It's an investment. It really is. Our cheapest product retails for $299 right now. Yeah, like it might go on sale sometimes, but that is not cheap. But the takeaway is, I want anybody who maybe sees this episode or hears about SwiftPaws, just try something new with your dog or your cat, right? Or your pet. Do something novel, like take their toy that you already have, that you've already spent money on a year ago, wrap it up in some paper, right? If you got an Amazon package last week, there's some brown paper in that. Like wrap up that toy, put it on the shelf for a week. You would be so surprised when you bring that toy off the shelf and they get to unwrap it. They get to shred that paper. Like you got a mess to clean up later, but whatever. And then they rediscover that toy that's gone missing for a week. Like that is such a unique enrichment experience. It's one of my favorite things to do with my own pets, like toy rotation. I could go into the science of it, but just try something new. And if you're interested in this kind of thing, yes, would love for you to buy our products and become a customer. But the bigger mission is to get people playing better with their pets, just on a general level.
Nice. And I think that's an amazing mission. And hey, she probably won't say it, but I'll say, go get the product. I've seen enough videos of this thing and read enough reviews that it seems like you definitely will not be sorry. So go get the product. And again, hopefully you got something out of this video for all the aspiring entrepreneurs that's kind of, they're on the fence or on the edge of kind of taking that leap. Hopefully you got some information to kind of make that decision on whether or not you want to go all in or not go all in. And audience, we will see you next time. Take care.